The Cypress Swamp, Lowcountry, South Carolina, August 1852. The heat did not break at night. It merely thickened, turning from a dry kiln blast by day to a wet, woolen blanket after sunset, heavy with the stink of decay and the drone of mosquitoes. The boy moved through the black water as if he were part of it, his body submerged to the chin, his eyes two chips of obsidian reflecting the sliver of moon. The only sounds were the suck of mud at his legs and the distant, haunted cry of a limpkin bird. He was 10 years old, and he was a ghost. 3 days earlier, he had ceased to be Isaiah, the quiet boy who mended baskets in the corner of the weaving shed at Silverwood Plantation. He had become a rumor, a set of disappearing footprints leading from the edge of the rice field into the vast, swallowing green of the swamp. The hounds had come first, their baying turning frantic and confused at the water's edge. Then the men on horses, their lanterns bobbing like malevolent fireflies. Master's son, Clayton Vickers, had been among them, his voice sharp with a fury that was more about the inconvenience than the loss of property. Find him. He can't have gone far. He's just a child. But the swamp knew no child. It knew only the quick and the dead. Isaiah had chosen quickness. He had learned its language in secret, listening to old Solomon, the root doctor who'd been sold away 2 winters past. Solomon's words came back to him now in the suffocating dark: the swamp ain't your enemy, boy. It's a door. But you gotta know how to ask to go through. He had asked by rubbing his skin with mint and mud to confuse the hounds. He had asked by walking backwards into a creek bed. He had asked by eating nothing but the sour purple berries of the pepper vine and the cold, crisp hearts of swamp cabbage. Now, he was deep in its belly, aiming for a place Solomon had whispered of only once, a hummock of high ground where a giant cypress, struck by lightning, formed a hollow large enough for a man. He needed to reach it before first light. The patrollers would be circling wider, and a boy in open water was a silhouette waiting to be caught. His hand, groping forward under the water, touched something solid and smooth. A log. He began to pull himself along it, letting his feet drift. His mind, weary with terror, began to drift too. It floated back, not to the flight, but to the beginning. To the moment he was made. The memory surfaced, unbidden and complete, as vivid as the gator's eyes he'd seen glowing red an hour before. It was a story he'd been told in the dark, a story worn smooth by repetition, the first and only heirloom he owned. Silverwood Plantation, Berkeley County, April 1842. He was born during the spring flood, when the Combahee River swelled over its banks and turned the rice fields into a shallow, restless inland sea. His mother, Grace, was a laundress, but that day she had been out with the planting gang, her belly a great, taut mound under her faded dress. The overseer, a pinched man named Pike with breath that smelled of raw onion, had shouted at her to keep up. The pain took her mid-row, doubling her over in the black muck. They let 2 field women, Bess and Lottie, carry her back to the row of cabins they called the street. There was no doctor for the enslaved. Bess, who had birthed 11 and buried 7, took charge. The cabin was a single room of bare plank and chink, smelling of smoke and old sweat. Grace labored through the afternoon and into the night, the rhythmic groans keeping time with the chorus of frogs in the flooded fields. Just before dawn, the boy slipped into the world. He did not cry. He opened his eyes, dark and solemn, and looked about the dim room as if taking inventory. Bess washed him in tepid water from the kettle. "This one come quiet," she murmured. "He done used all his noise gettin' here." Grace, exhausted, held him to her chest. She had already lost 2. A girl, stillborn. A boy, taken with the fever at 3 months. She examined this new son's face, tracing the curve of his ear, the surprising lightness of his palms. "Isaiah," she whispered. It was a name from the Bible she could not read, heard once from a traveling preacher allowed to minister to the slaves one Sunday. It meant salvation of God. It was a whisper of a prayer. His first memory was of sound. The creak of the well pulley at dawn. The thud-thud-thud of the pestle in the mortar as corn was pounded into meal. The distant, brutal crack of the lash, a sound that made all other sounds stop for a heartbeat. And his mother's voice, a low, warm hum as she worked, telling him stories of clever animals and trickster figures, stories where the weak outsmarted the strong. His world was the street, a dirt track lined with 20 cabins, each housing multiple families behind walls so thin privacy was a forgotten concept. He learned the hierarchy of the place early. At the top, in the great white house with its columned porch, lived Master Josiah Vickers and his family. Then the white overseer, Pike, in his smaller house near the barns. Then the enslaved drivers, like Big Micah, whose authority was a complex, resented thing. Then the skilled ones, the blacksmith, the carpenter, the weavers. Then the field hands. And at the very bottom, the children, until they were old enough to be of use. His mother's work was in the wash-house, a steamy, bleach-scented shed where she and 3 other women fought a never-ending battle against dirt, grass stains, and the sheer volume of fabric required by the Vickers household. From the age of 4, Isaiah was her shadow. His job was to hand her the wooden clothespins, to stir the boiling cauldrons with a long stick, to chase away the chickens that pecked at the drying linens on the grass. It was in the wash-house he discovered his trait. Not a loud talent, not a show of strength or song. It was a deep, preternatural stillness. While other children fidgeted, whined, or played, Isaiah could sit for hours, watching. He watched the way his mother's hands, red and cracked, folded a sheet with a precise, military snap. He watched the path of a spider weaving its web in the rafters. He watched the shifting light on the brick floor. He absorbed the world through his eyes, filing it away. He spoke little, but he saw everything. This silence was mistaken for simplicity by some. Overseer Pike would sometimes flick a pebble at him. "You in there, boy?" Or just hollow. But Grace knew better. At night, in their corner of a shared cabin, she would test him. "What color was Mrs. Vickers's visiting dress today, son?" "Blue," he'd say, his voice soft. "Like a jaybird. With a stain, the size of a pea, on the left sleeve cuff." She'd stare at him, amazed. "And how many horses in the second wagon that came from town?" "4. One bay had a loose shoe on the front right." It clicked. This was his gift, a memory that was less a recollection and more a perfect, enduring imprint. He was a living ledger, recording the minutiae of Silverwood without meaning to. He didn't understand its value. It was simply how he was. His first lesson in cruelty came not with a whip, but with a ledger of a different sort. He was 6. A man from Charleston came to Silverwood, a trader with a wide-brimmed hat and a smile that never touched his eyes. He walked the street with Master Vickers, who pointed at men and women, lifting their arms to show muscle, peering into their mouths to check teeth. It was a cattle show. The enslaved stood, faces blank, eyes fixed on the middle distance, a skill they had all mastered. Isaiah, holding his mother's apron, watched from the wash-house door. The trader stopped before a young man named Eli, a field hand with a laugh that could be heard across the quarters. Eli was Grace's brother. Isaiah's uncle. "Strong back," the trader said, thumping Eli's shoulder. Master Vickers consulted a small book. "Price is $7.50. He's prime." A discussion followed, numbers volleying back and forth. Eli's face was a mask of stone, but a muscle twitched in his jaw. The trader nodded finally, counted out banknotes. He produced a set of shackles from his bag. The metallic clink as they closed around Eli's wrists was the loudest sound Isaiah had ever heard. Grace's hand clamped over Isaiah's mouth before he could make a sound. She pulled him back into the steamy dark of the wash-house, her body trembling. He heard the wagon roll away, the clatter of its wheels on the packed earth. Eli's laugh was gone from Silverwood. That night, for the first time, Grace told him the other story. Not the animal fables, but the true one. "You got a daddy," she said, her voice raw. His name was Joseph. He was a cooper on the Butler place, 3 miles downriver. Master Vickers sold him to a sugarman in Louisiana when I was carrying you. "For debt," he said. She took Isaiah's small face in her hands. "This is the way of it, child. They can break anything. A back. A family. A heart. The only thing they can't touch is what you keep in here. She tapped his temple. You remember, Isaiah. You remember everything. That's your weapon. As Isaiah grew, his work formalized. He was too slight for the heavy field work, and his quiet diligence was noted. At 7, he was moved from the washhouse to the weaving shed. Here, under the sharp eye of an old woman named Aunt June, he learned to mend. He learned the warp and weft of cotton and wool, how to splice broken threads so the join was invisible, how to reweave a torn section of cloth. The work was fine and tedious, suited to his nature. His fingers, small and clever, became adept with the needle and the bone shuttle. The shed was a world of women, their hands flying, their voices a constant, low murmur of talk, gossip, warning, lament. Isaiah, the silent little boy in the corner, was beneath notice, and so he heard everything. He heard about which overseer was stealing whiskey, which driver was taking liberties, which of Master Vickers's sons was in trouble with gambling debts. He absorbed the rhythms of the plantation, planting season, flooding season, harvest season, and the dreaded lay-by time when repairs were made and punishments were often meted out. Master Josiah Vickers was not a man of hot rage. He was a man of cold calculation. He appeared on the street every Sunday morning, immaculate in his broadcloth coat, to inspect the premises. He spoke in a measured, dry tone. He never raised his voice. His cruelty was in his decisions, in the implacable logic of his ledger. A drop in rice prices meant rations were cut. A broken piece of equipment meant Sunday rest was cancelled for repairs. A rumor of insolence meant an example had to be made. It was Vickers who ordered the sale of Eli. It was Vickers who, when an aging woman named Suki could no longer keep up in the field, had her transferred to the punishing work of the pounding mill, where the unending thunder of the pestles broke her health completely in a matter of months. He did it without malice, merely as a correction of an inefficient asset. This quiet, bureaucratic evil was more terrifying than any overseer's tantrum. It was a force of nature, like a flood or a drought, impossible to reason with or appeal to. Overseer Pike was the instrument of this will. A small man given borrowed power, he relished its application. His violence was not cartoonish, it was petty, personal, and relentless. A missed spot in hoeing a row earned a day in the sweatbox, a tiny, sun-baked metal cabinet. A look he deemed insolent could mean a night in the stocks. He preferred psychological torment, serving a family their reduced rations personally, with a smirk, separating friends into different work gangs, withholding the passes that allowed travel to see a spouse on a neighboring plantation. Isaiah observed it all. He saw the slow erosion of hope in the faces around him. He saw the way shoulders began to slump, not from fatigue alone, but from a weary understanding of their permanence. His own safety was precarious, tied to his usefulness and his invisibility. He mended Master's fine shirts and Missis's lace collars. His work passed through their hands, yet he remained a non-entity to them, a piece of the room's furniture. His one solace was his mother. At the end of each day, he would return to their cabin. She would examine his hands, gentle the stiffness from his fingers. She continued his education in the only way she could. "Tell me what you saw today," she would say. And he would recount it all, the number of wagons, the conversations between the white foreman, the state of the crops, the mood in the big house. She was building his archive, though neither knew to what end. When Isaiah was 9, the system tightened its grip. A fever swept through the low country. It took the lives of 3 infants on the street and left a dozen more weak and wailing. In the big house, Master Vickers's eldest granddaughter, a child of 5, fell ill. Doctors were summoned from Charleston. Her room was kept dark, the air thick with the smell of camphor and fear. After the child died, a pall fell over Silverwood. Master Vickers retreated into his study. Mrs. took to her bed. And the enslaved people waited, breath held, for the storm they knew would come. Grief in the big house always meant wrath for the street. It arrived not as a thunderclap, but as a decree. At the Sunday inspection, Master Vickers, his face gray and drawn, announced a new policy. Efficiency has been lacking. Morale is poor. From this week, all children over the age of 8 will be housed in the old nursery building. They will be fed and schooled and disciplined together to better prepare them for their duties. Family housing is a privilege for proven workers. A stunned silence followed. Then a low moan rose from the women. Grace's hand crushed Isaiah's. The nursery was a crumbling outbuilding near the smokehouse, a barracks where children were packed together under the watch of a severe elderly woman named Cora, who believed in order enforced with a switch. It was a deliberate dismantling of the last private solace, the nighttime whisper between mother and child. That evening, Grace packed Isaiah's few things, an extra shirt, a thin blanket, the small cornhusk doll he'd had since infancy. Her movements were swift, desperate. She knelt before him. "Listen to me now," she said, her voice fierce. "You take that memory of yours, and you lock it up tight. You become a shadow in that nursery. You cause no trouble. You give them no reason to look at you twice. You remember everything you see, everything you hear. And you wait." "For what, Mama?" he asked, his own fear a cold stone in his belly. "For a crack in the wall," she said, her eyes gleaming with a hope she didn't fully feel. "For a chance. They think by breaking us apart, they make us weaker. They don't know it makes some of us desperate. And a desperate person sees paths a contented one walks right past." She hugged him, breathing in the smell of his hair. "You are my salvation, Isaiah. Remember." The nursery was a lesson in institutional loneliness. 30 children slept on pallets on a filthy floor. The rules were absolute: silence after dark, strict portions of gruel, immediate obedience. Cora's switch was a constant presence, snapping at ankles and hands for the slightest infraction. The older boys bullied the younger. The air smelled of unwashed bodies and despair. Isaiah retreated into his silence completely. He spoke only when spoken to. He performed every task perfectly, robotically. At night, he lay awake, listening to the coughs and whimpers, staring at the patterns of moonlight through the broken shingles. He conducted his nightly inventory, replaying the day's images, the path the supply wagon took into the woods, the hour the watchman changed at the tobacco barn, the hidden gap under the fence near the pecan grove where a dog had dug. He saw his mother only at a distance, when the work gangs marched out at dawn. Sometimes she would catch his eye, the faintest nod passing between them. It was the thread that kept him tethered. The turning point came not from a dramatic act of rebellion, but from a mundane act of kindness. A new girl, Ada, had been brought to the nursery. She was small for her 11 years, with a twisted foot that made her limp. She was assigned to the weaving shed with Isaiah. She was clumsy with the shuttle, her hands trembling. Aunt June, impatient, would cuff her ears. One afternoon, as Ada fumbled yet again, tears of frustration cutting tracks through the dust on her cheeks, Isaiah did something reckless. Without a word, he slid off his stool, took the shuttle from her hand, and in 30 seconds, deftly fixed the tangle in the warped threads. He handed it back and returned to his seat. He had broken the nursery's first rule: do not draw attention. He had also broken an unspoken law of self-preservation: do not connect. Ada stared at him with wide, grateful eyes. From then on, a silent alliance formed. She would save him a crust of bread from her meager ration. He would subtly correct her weaving errors before Aunt June noticed. They never spoke of it. They were two ghosts acknowledging each other's presence in the void. It was Ada who, one rain-swept afternoon in the shed, whispered the news that shattered Isaiah's carefully constructed numbness. Her voice was so low he almost didn't catch it over the drumming on the roof. "They say a trader's coming next week. From Mississippi. They say he wants house servants. They're looking at the quiet ones. The ones who cause no fuss." Isaiah's blood turned to ice. He kept his eyes on his mending, but the needle shook in his hand. A quiet one. A child with no apparent attachments. He was the perfect commodity. That night, in the nursery, the terror was absolute. To be sold south was to be sentenced to a slow death in the sugar or cotton fields, a fate so dreaded it was spoken of in hushed, apocalyptic terms. Isaiah lay paralyzed. His memory, his weapon, was useless against this. He could recall every detail of Silverwood, but it was a prison he knew. The unknown was a swallowing abyss. He had to see his mother. He had to hear her voice, even if just once more. The risk was monumental. Being caught outside the nursery after dark meant a flogging. But the thought of being taken without seeing her was unthinkable. He waited until the deepest part of the night, when Cora's snore was a regular rasp. He slid from his pallet, moving with the slow, liquid grace he'd practiced in his mind 1,000 times. He slipped out the door, into the silver drizzle. He knew the patrols. He knew the paths. He moved from shadow to shadow, a small, dark blot against the darker ground. He reached the familiar cabin. He heard soft crying from within. He tapped on the shutter, a pattern they'd used when he was small. The door cracked open. Grace pulled him inside, crushing him to her. She was shaking. "You shouldn't have come." "Oh, child, you shouldn't." "The traitor, Mama," he gasped into her dress. "They say he wants the quiet ones." She held him at arm's length. In the gloom, he could see her face was set, resolved. The grief was gone, replaced by a terrifying clarity. "Then you cannot be here when he comes." "How?" "You run." The word hung in the close air. It was the unspeakable thing, the dream that ended in horror for so many, the dogs, the manacles, the brutal, public punishment. "To where?" he whispered. "North," she said, as if it were a real place, not a fairy tale. "But first, to the swamp." Solomon talked of it. A path. Others have gone. Some made it. You have what they didn't. What? That mind. That map in your head. You know this land better than Pike does. You know the rhythms, the blind spots. And you are small. The swamp will hide you. She moved quickly. From a hollow in the wall, she pulled out a small, wrapped bundle. A knife, its blade honed sharp on a stolen whetstone. A sliver of flint. A handful of salt wrapped in rag. A strip of dried possum meat. It was a treasure hoard, assembled over years for this impossible moment. You go now. Tonight. The rain will cover your trail. Head for the river, then follow it east into the deep swamp. Find the lightning-struck cypress. Solomon said it's a sanctuary. Wait there. Watch. The patrollers will search the roads. They won't go deep, not for one boy. When the search dies, you move. Follow the river at night. Steal a boat if you can. Head for Charleston. Get lost in the city. Find the free black folks. Look for a church with a yellow door. Solomon said they help. She was giving him a mythology, a chain of whispers and rumors to cling to. It was all she had to give. I can't leave you, he sobbed, the stoicism of years breaking. You must. Her voice was iron. If you stay, they will sell you, and I will die. If you go, I will live, because I will know a part of me is free. Your running is my survival, Isaiah. Do you understand? He didn't, but he nodded. She hugged him one last time, a fierce, bone-crushing embrace. Remember. Remember everything. Now go. And don't look back. He slipped out into the rain. He didn't look back. But as he melted into the tree line at the edge of the field, his perfect memory captured the final image. His mother, a silhouette in the cabin door, one hand raised not in farewell, but in a gesture of pushing him away, of launching him into the world. Then she closed the door, extinguishing the light. For 3 days, Isaiah lived like an animal. The swamp was a green cathedral of suffering and beauty. He drank brackish water filtered through moss. He ate crawfish he caught in shallow pools, eating them raw. He slept in the crooks of trees, startling awake at every guttural groan and splash. The memory of his mother's words was his compass. The lightning-struck cypress. He found it on the 4th evening, just as the light was failing. It was a giant, its heartwood blasted out by some ancient fury, creating a cave of blackened wood, big enough for him to crawl inside. It smelled of charcoal and damp earth. It was, for the first time in days, a place that was not actively trying to kill him. He waited. As Grace predicted, the search was loud and close for 2 days, then grew more distant. He heard dogs, voices, once the blast of a shotgun fired into the air, a warning or a celebration, he didn't know. He stayed still. His stillness was his salvation. On the morning of the 7th day, as a mist rose from the water, he saw something. A flat-bottomed bateau, pulled by a single figure, gliding silently through the cypress knees. Not a patroller. This man was old, his shoulders bent, his skin the color of the river mud. He wore the rough clothes of a trapper or a fisherman. He moved with the intimate knowledge of one who belonged to the swamp. Isaiah watched, hidden. The man stopped not 50 yards from the tree, checking a set of eel traps. He hummed a tune, low and mournful. It was a song Isaiah had heard before, a spiritual hum in the fields. A song of his people. A choice lay before him. Solomon's chain of whispers, find the free black folks. This man was here, in the heart of the terror. He was either free or a runaway himself. He was either sanctuary or a betrayal waiting to happen. Isaiah's mind, his great recorder, replayed his mother's face, her absolute command. Your running is my survival. To survive, he had to trust the chain. He had to take the next link. He slid from the tree hollow, into the knee-deep water. The sound was a soft ripple. The old man's humming stopped. He turned slowly, his eyes scanning the mist. They settled on the small, skeletal figure emerging from the giant cypress. For a long moment, they stared at each other. The old man's face showed no surprise, only a deep, weary assessment. Well, he said, his voice a dry rustle. You found the door. I'm looking for the church with the yellow door, Isaiah whispered, the first words he'd spoken in a week. A flicker in the old man's eyes. He gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod. That's a long way from here, child. A long way through a world of trouble. He gestured with his chin. Get in the boat. You stink of fear and swamp. We'll get you to a place where you can breathe. It was not a promise of freedom. It was a next step. Isaiah waded forward and climbed into the bateau. The old man, who called himself Moses, pulled them away from the lightning-struck tree, deeper into the labyrinth, away from Silverwood forever. The war came and went. It was a distant thunder to Isaiah, now going by the name of Isaiah Freeman, a tailor with a small, respected shop in Philadelphia. He had arrived there via the chain, Moses to a fishing boat captain with abolitionist leanings, to a cellar in Charleston, to the hold of a coastal trader, to the safe house of the church with the yellow door, to the long, terror-filled journey up the Underground Railroad. His memory had served as his passport, recalling every safe word, every landmark, every face. He had built a life. Quiet, dignified. He married a schoolteacher named Charlotte. He had a daughter. He never spoke of Silverwood. The archive in his mind was sealed shut, a vault of pain he dared not open. One afternoon, a well-dressed white man entered his shop. He had the earnest air of a scholar. Mr. Freeman. My name is Edward Clarkson. I'm with the Freedmen's Bureau. We are attempting to document, to reunite families separated before the war. Isaiah's heart, a still pool for decades, felt a stone drop into it. He said nothing. We have compiled plantation records, bills of sale, Clarkson continued gently. A network of letters. It is a long shot, but we are trying. He placed a worn ledger on the counter. It was marked Silverwood Plantation, Inventory and Transactions, 1835-1855. Isaiah's hands trembled. He opened the book. The spidery, precise handwriting of Josiah Vickers swam before his eyes. He saw the entries for births, for deaths. He saw his own name, Isaiah, male child of grace, born April 12, 1842. He saw the entry for his father, Joseph, sold to A. LeClaire, New Orleans, January 1842. His throat tightened. Then Clarkson placed a small, faded daguerreotype on the counter. This was found among the personal effects of Clayton Vickers, the son, He died at Cold Harbor. We believe it was taken around 1845. We are trying to identify the people in it. Isaiah picked it up. It was a family portrait, taken on the porch of the big house. Josiah Vickers, stern and upright. His wife, pale and lace-covered. Their children arrayed around them. And in the background, blurred but clear, the enslaved staff, a woman holding a tray, a man standing by a column. And there, at the very edge of the frame, sitting on the steps, partially obscured by a potted fern, was a woman in a simple dress, looking not at the camera, but slightly away, her expression one of profound, contained sorrow. In her arms, she held a baby, swaddled in a light-colored cloth. It was Grace. And the baby was him. The world narrowed to that square of tin. He could see the detail his perfect memory confirmed, the pattern of the lace on Mrs. Vickers's dress, the chipped paint on the column, the specific way his mother's head was tilted, the tiny, clenched fist of the infant emerging from the swaddle. He had been there. He was in the record of the oppressor, a ghost in the background of their celebration. But it was the baby's hand that stopped his breath. Zooming in, the image blurring, he saw it. Around the infant's tiny wrist was a barely visible band. And on that band was a minuscule, intricate pattern. A pattern of interlocking lines. It was not jewelry. It was a tiny, tightly woven bracelet made of corn husk and horsehair. He knew that pattern. He had invented it. At 5 years old, bored in the wash house, he had woven 2 such bracelets, one for himself, one for his mother. His had been lost long ago. Hers, she had promised, she would wear always. She had put it on him for the photograph. A secret act of defiance, a declaration of ownership. This is my child. In the midst of their tableau, she had stamped him as hers. Mr. Freeman. Clarkson's voice was far away. Do you recognize anyone? Isaiah touched the cool glass over his mother's face. Yes, he said, his voice thick. That is my mother. Her name was Grace. And the child? That, Isaiah said, a lifetime of compressed emotion behind the word, is me. The reunion he hoped for never came. Clarkson's inquiries led to a dead end. Grace had been sold from Silverwood in late 1853, a year after Isaiah's disappearance, listed in a bill of sale simply as woman, Grace, approximate 35 years, laundress, sold to settle debts. Her trail vanished into the vast, hungry maw of the domestic slave trade. Isaiah lived another 30 years. He was a successful man, a pillar of his community. His daughter had children. He never returned south. He kept the daguerreotype in a drawer, taking it out only on rare, quiet evenings when the light was low. He would look at the blurry image of his mother, her eyes averted from the white faces in front of her, focused on some distant, private horizon. He would look at the baby in her arms, a child who had no idea of the journey ahead, of the swamp and the lightning-struck tree, of the loss that would define him. His memory, once a vault of terror, became in the end a library of ghosts. He could recall the smell of the washhouse steam, the sound of Eli's shackles, the taste of swamp cabbage, the feel of the old bateau's damp wood under his hands, the exact pressure of his mother's final embrace. He remembered it all, with a clarity that time could not dim. He understood, in his later years, that his story was not one of grand heroism or dramatic justice. It was a story of quiet fracture and desperate, incomplete repair. It was the story of a child who was made into a secret, then made into a fugitive, then made into a man, all before he was ever allowed to be just a boy. He carried Silverwood in him not as a scar, but as a foundational layer of his being, like the silt of the Combahee River laid down in his soul. The injustice was not that he had suffered, though he had, but that the world that had created his suffering had simply moved on, its ledgers closed, its crimes unatoned, its human calculus forgotten. The photo was proof. He had been there, a living, breathing child with a mother who loved him, rendered as a speck of background in another family's story. When he died, the daguerreotype passed to his daughter. The story, however, he took with him. The full, unvarnished archive, the names, the sounds, the specific quality of the light on the day he ran, all of it faded into silence. He became, like his mother Grace, like old Solomon, like Ada with the twisted foot, a footnote in an unrecorded history. A single thread, pulled from the vast, torn tapestry of forgotten lives, remembered for a moment in a tailor's shop in 1866, before being woven back into the darkness.